The Old Man and the Sea. Feedback. Lesson objectives. All learners will read and record their assessment feedback, mark, grade, what went well and targets in their assessment record. Identify the important aspects of a question 4. Identify possible quotes from the text which address the 3 issues in the question. Get feedback on how question 4 could have been approached, and see the level 4 and 3 mark schemes for question 4. Also, revise necessary items to include in a successful question 5, writing, description and story. Read and evaluate a description and a story, and look at question 5, level 4 and level 3 mark schemes for content and organisation and technical accuracy. Question 4. Focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 16 to the end. A student said, "While it seems that the old man is widely seen as a failure, in this part of the story the writer shows that the boy still has faith in him and that they greatly respect each other. To what extent do you agree?" In your response, you could consider your impressions of the old man as a failure. Evaluate how the writer presents the respect between the boy and the old man, and support your response with references to the text. 20 marks. Which are the important elements of the question? The important parts are that the old man is widely seen as a failure, the boy still has faith in him, and they greatly respect each other. What you need to do is consider your impressions of the old man as a failure, evaluate how the writer presents the respect between them, and make sure you use quotations, which are references to the text. 20 marks. So make sure that you write at least 3 good paragraphs based on at least 3 quotes and analyse those. I'll read the text in sections, and for each section we'll look for evidence of the old man's failure, the boy's faith in him, and the respect that they have for each other. "Santiago," the boy said to him as they climbed the bank from where the skiff was hauled up, "I could go with you again. We've made some money." The old man had taught the boy to fish, and the boy loved him. "No," the old man said, "you're with a lucky boat. Stay with them." "But remember how you went 87 days without fish, and then we caught big ones every day for 3 weeks. "I remember," the old man said. "I know you did not leave me because you doubted." "It was Papa made me leave. I'm a boy and I must obey him." "I know," the old man said. "It's quite normal." "He hasn't much faith." "No," the old man said, "but we have, haven't we?" "Yes," the boy said. "Can I offer you a beer on the terrace and then we'll take the stuff home?" "Why not?" the old man said. Between fishermen. Where do you see evidence of the old man's failure, the boy's faith in him, and their respect for each other? There's no real evidence of the old man's failure on this page. There is some evidence of the boy's faith in him. "We've made some money," says the boy. He also says, "But remember when you went 87 days without fish and then we caught big ones every day for 3 weeks." So he is remembering that they have had success in the past. Most of the dialogue on this page is evidence of their respect for each other. The boy loved him, and Santiago says to the boy, "Stay with them," because he wants the boy to be successful. "I know you did not leave me because you doubted." Santiago is saying that he trusts the boy and he knows that the boy has faith in him. Santiago also accepts that the boy has loyalty to his father. It's quite normal. The boy shows that his father doesn't have much faith on line 25. And he also offers to buy a beer for Santiago and take it to the beer terrace, just like an adult man. The man, Santiago, accepts this and realizes that the boy wants to become or look as though he's a professional, and so he addresses him as a fisherman. They sat on the terrace and many of the fishermen made fun of the old man, and he was not angry. Others of the older fishermen looked at him and were sad. The successful fishermen of that day were already in and had butchered their marlin out and carried them, laid full length across 2 planks, with 2 men staggering at the end of each plank, to the fish house, where they waited for the ice truck to carry them to the market in Havana. "Santiago?" the boy said. "Yes," the old man said. He was holding his glass and thinking of many years ago. Can I go out to get sardines for you tomorrow? No, go and play baseball. I can still row and Rogelio will throw the net. I would like to go. If I cannot fish with you, I would like to serve in some way. You bought me a beer, the old man said. You're already a man. How old was I when you first took me in a boat? Where is the evidence of the old man's failure, the boy's faith in him, and their respect for each other? Evidence of the old man's failure in the eyes of the other fishermen is in this paragraph that starts on line 30. The fisherman made fun of the old man, and the older fisherman looked at him and was sad. There's also a contrast with the successful fishermen and what they were doing in the fish market. There's evidence of respect of the boy and the man for each other. The boy offers to go and get sardines for the man, and Santiago says, no, go and play. He can still manage with his other employee or mate, Rogelio, who will throw his nets for him. The boy wants to serve him in some way on line 39, and Santiago respects this. And with the offer of a beer, he says to the boy, you're already a man. So he's respecting him and treating him as a mature adult. So the boy has asked Santiago about their fishing history together and how old he was when he first went out. Santiago says, 5, and you nearly were killed when I brought the fish in too green, and he nearly tore the boat to pieces. Can you remember? I can remember the tail slapping and banging and the thwart breaking and the noise of the clubbing. I can remember you throwing me into the bow where the wet coiled lines were and feeling the whole boat shiver and the noise of you clubbing him like chopping a tree down. Can you really remember that, or did I just tell you? I remember everything from when we first went together. The old man looked at him with his sunburned, confident, loving eyes. If you were my boy, I'd take you out and gamble, he said, but you're your father's and your mother's, and you're in a lucky boat. Where's the evidence of the old man's failure, the boy's faith in him, and their respect for each other? In this section, the boy talks about remembering their early trips together for the second and third time. He talks about the events when a large fish was landed on the boat and Santiago had to club it to death and made a lot of noise in the process, and it was quite a dangerous situation, so it's obviously made a very big impression on him. Santiago looks at the boy with confident, loving eyes. If you were my boy, I'd take you out and gamble. But he acknowledges that the boy isn't his. The boy has a different father, and it's important to let the boy be successful in his fishing career, so he should stick with another boat. So he shows great consideration and respect for the boy and his family. This is the level 4 mark scheme for this question. In order to get one of the top grades, you need to develop a convincing and critical response to the focus of the statement. That's the 3 items of failure, faith and respect. You have to show perceptive understanding of the writer's methods, evaluate critically and in detail the effect on the reader, and select a good wide selection or a judicious selection of textual detail. So the mark scheme reads like this. For level 4, the boy's memory of their first trip together when he was 5 shows that his great respect for the old man is profound and long-standing. The vividly descriptive memory acts as a shared history between them, with the childish repetition of I can remember suggesting that the boy can recall every detail of the occasion their bond was established. This is further emphasised by the violent verb choices slapping, banging, clubbing, which, despite the trauma of the experience, retrospectively help portray both the excitement and the terror of the incident and the strength of the old man. The boy's confident assertion that I remember everything, independent of the fact that the old man has told him, shows how the writer emphasises that the genuine shared recollection of their past experiences is the foundation of their mutual respect. So that was a top grade answer. This would be a pass grade answer, so level 3. The memory of the first fishing trip is used to show the reader that the faith and respect between them has been established as far back as when the boy was just 5. The boy repeats, "I can remember," to show how vividly he recalls every detail of this trip, as if this incident is the source of his continuing faith in the old man's ability. The use of violent verbs like clubbing also show that he was in awe of the strength of the old man, forming a sense of respect. Given their shared experiences over a number of years, the writer suggests the boy needs the old man as much as the old man needs him. So we've moved from an advanced analysis to a clear analysis, a clear and relevant response, clear understanding, and evaluating clearly, selecting a range of relevant textual references. So you have to be very clear and show that you do understand the text. These answers in the mark scheme tend to focus on the act of clubbing a fish to death in the past, but there are lots of other things that you can write about. Nobody actually wrote about that in the class. So what you can write about, for example, in addition, are the boy's eagerness to talk with the old man, including his name, Santiago, frequently. The symbolic nature of them sharing a beer between fishermen, emphasised by the fact that it's the boy who buys them, so the older man is treating him as a professional. The role of the old man as a father figure, which some of you did mention, shown by use of the collective pronoun we to show contrast to the boy's own parents. The boy's insistence with repeated use of questions to show his willingness to help the old man. The old man's refusal of help with the use of baseball as a childish contrast to the dangers of being at sea. And the memory of the first trip together with the vivid descriptions suggesting the strength of the boy's respect for the old man. Writing, question 5. Your local newspaper is running a creative writing competition, and the best entries will be published. Either write a description of a fishing village, as suggested by this picture. Here is the picture of the fishing village. I've brightened it a little bit so it's clearer. You might notice that there is a contrast between the rainbow and the dark, angry sky. That's important, and you should use that in your description because it can imply a mood or a tone using the technique of pathetic fallacy, where the weather can reflect the tone and the goings-on in your description or your story. Obviously, the buildings and the actual harbour itself are going to be quite old as well. So try and remember all that when you're doing your description. You don't want to describe it exactly, that's not what you're doing. What you're trying to do is evoke a mood and a tone by inventing the language around something like this picture. You're advised to make a plan. So my plan is that it will be set in a Scottish fishing village. I'm going to make sure I use the stormy skies and the rainbow. There's going to be a sinister tone and a tragic backstory. I'll read each part of the story and point out the techniques that I've used. Description of a fishing village. It was a flash of lightning that illuminated the sky that caught everyone's attention. As the villagers rushed to secure their boats and tie down their belongings, an eerie feeling settled over the town. The distant sound of thunder echoed through the streets, mingling with the groaning of the old wooden houses. The boats in the harbour conspired, creaking and clashing as they collided with increasing frequency, creating a cacophony of chatter. The small Scottish fishing village of Portree was nestled along the rugged cliffside, its old houses clinging to the edge as if holding on for dear life. The sea below churned and roared, the stormy sky above casting a sinister shadow over the quaint but resilient town. I have a narrative hook going straight in with a thunderstorm. The semantic field is sinister. I've used words like eerie, thunder, groaning and conspired. There is alliteration, conspired, collided, creaking, clashing, cacophony and chatter, and personification in the underlined words conspired and chatter, which is something that people do. These paragraphs are all about the sights and the sound. There's also some zoomorphism in the word roared and more alliteration in stormy sky. The locals knew to take cover when the sky turned dark and the winds picked up, for they had seen the wrath of the sea too many times before. But on this particular day, there was something more than just a storm brewing in the air. The metallic tang of salt and lightning was a promising threat. It was unwise to ignore it. As the villagers huddled together, seeking refuge from the impending storm, an old fisherman named Angus couldn't help but be transported back in time to a fateful day many years ago. He could still feel the salt water spray on his face and the weight of the fishing nets in his hands as he and the crew set out to sea. The sky had been just as dark and foreboding then, but they had been determined to make a good catch. So in the grey area, I've started the emotional flashback, looking to a particular day when there was a fishing disaster in the village, or with the village fishermen. I'm talking about taste in this paragraph, and I've used an oxymoron, promising threat. I carry on with the emotional flashback, telling you that the people are transported back in time to a fateful day many years ago. Not literally, but in the mind of Angus. I then move on to a section on how it felt during the event that he's flashing back to. So it talks about the saltwater spray and the weight of the fishing nets. The semantic field is still sinister and foreboding. It actually says dark and foreboding. And there's more explanation about the emotional flashback. They've been determined to make a good catch. However, their luck had quickly turned as the storm grew stronger and the waves rose higher. As they battled against the elements, Angus had watched in horror as his best friend and fellow fisherman, Finlay, was swept overboard by a monstrous and merciless wave. The memory of Finlay's screams and the sight of his lifeless body being carried away by the raging sea haunted Angus to this day. And as he looked out at the stormy sea and the rainbow that had appeared in the distance, he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over him. For in this village, a rainbow was not a symbol of hope and promise, but rather a reminder of the lives that had been lost at sea. It was a sinister omen that foretold of more tragedies to come. So I have used a signpost phrase or discourse marker here in the word however on the top line, and that is recommended in the mark scheme. The semantic field is one of fatality, horror, and there's alliteration in the same semantic field of monstrous and merciless. And it carries on with memory and lifeless to show that there was a death. There's personification in the word raging, and there's a very sinister semantic field, haunted, stormy, dread, sinister, and tragedies. Trembling with fear, Angus realised this was not just a memory, but a warning. The storm was not just a natural occurrence, but a manifestation of the anger and sorrow of those who'd been taken by the sea. As the villagers sought shelter from the storm, Angus couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt and regret wash over him, for he knew that he was responsible for Finlay's death, having pushed him to continue fishing even as the storm grew stronger. And as the storm raged on, Angus couldn't help but wonder if he too would meet the same fate as his friend, lost at sea and forever haunting the village of Portree. There is juxtaposition here, a memory and a warning placed close together. And the words manifestation, guilt, regret, death and haunting continue the sinister semantic field. The description ends inconclusively, looking to the future, but with no proper ending, and so we end with an ellipsis to show mystery. So the other option, if you're not doing a description of the fishing village, is a story about an unlikely friendship. Both of these have 24 marks for content and organisation and 16 marks for technical accuracy, 40 marks. And obviously you are supposed to plan both things before you start. So you choose one and you plan it and then you write it. Here's my plan for my story. It's about two partners. One has passed away. Both were friends with the local crows who gave them gifts in return for food. And one of them, who has passed away, has lost his wedding ring. An unlikely friendship. It was 18 months since James had passed, and as Michael sat amongst the crows on the allotment, his stomach grinding, overcome with grief and emotion, he decided to take a walk to distract himself and clear his head. As he wandered, his eye caught a glint of something shiny nestled among the dirt. Through his tears, the reflected light formed a small rainbow, and he rubbed his eyes. Before he could reach it, one of his crows descended, scooped it up, and flew off with it. He was powerless. I've started with a crisis. In this case, it's an emotional crisis. Nobody's in danger. It's not that kind of crisis. I have started with a long and complex descriptive sentence. And what I've done with mentioning the rainbow shining off the shiny thing that he can see is I've used that as foreshadowing, because rainbows, unlike in my previous description, are usually the sign of something good that's going to happen later. So that's foreshadowing a happy ending. I have a list of 3 things that the crow did, and at the end of the paragraph, after the long complex sentence, I've used a short powerful sentence. He was powerless. It shows his vulnerability, and also it's a good ending to the first paragraph. James and Michael had been a devoted couple for over 25 years. They lived a quiet and comfortable life in a small town where they had a beautiful allotment in the field next door that they tended together. James had always been the one with a particular fondness for wildlife, and he had developed a special bond with the crows that frequented their allotment. Every day he made it a point to feed them and sit with them, watching as they gracefully swooped down to snatch up the seeds and nuts he'd left for them. In return, the crows gave gifts: wrappers, keys, petals, and on one occasion an antique coin. These would be left on the doorstep. So I've changed the focus to both of the men when they were both alive and living their married life together. And as the piece is called An Unlikely Friendship, I've made sure that I've detailed the friendship between James and the crows in the allotment. James was gone now. The loss was devastating for Michael, who struggled to come to terms with living his life without his partner by his side. In the midst of his emotional crisis, Michael remembered the promise he and James had made to each other, that if anything ever happened to one of them, the other would continue to feed the crows in their memory. Without hesitation, Michael dutifully carried on with the routine James had started, heading to the allotment every day to feed the crows and sit amongst them in quiet reflection. So in this section, the focus has moved from both men back to Michael, and we find out that James has passed away. And we continue to talk about the friendship and the response to the question. So it's important that you do include the topic of the question in your answer. As he did so, he couldn't help but reflect on the memories of working in the allotment with James, who had always been the one to have a knack for growing the most beautiful flowers and vegetables. One particular memory that stood out in Michael's mind was the day that James had lost his wedding ring while they were working in the allotment. It had a diamond embossed on it, and it matched Michael's. It had fallen off while he was digging in the soil, and, despite their best efforts to find it, the ring had disappeared without a trace. It was a moment that had caused both of them a great deal of distress, and it had taken a while for James to come to terms with the loss. So I've continued the emotional flashback here, and we find out about a detail of the story, which is that James, before he died, lost his ring in the allotment. And the reason I've put that in there is so that we can bring the story to a satisfying conclusion at the end, but I haven't said exactly what's going to happen at this point. Michael finished feeding the crows, tidied the hose away, and left to go back home next door. There was something on the doorstep. The sight of it brought tears to his eyes. It had been left there for him to find. His heart swelled with a sense of peace and comfort, knowing that James's friendship with the crows was protecting him and guiding him through this difficult time. It was round, it was gold, and the familiar diamond mark was clearly visible. So we have a positive resolution. The reader is left to realise that the crow has delivered James's ring. And so we've come full circle from an emotional crisis to a resolution of that crisis and some hope for the future. Here is the mark scheme for content and organisation. So for the top grades, your communication needs to be compelling, convincing communication. So the tone, style and register are assuredly matched to purpose and audience. You have extensive and ambitious vocabulary with sustained crafting of linguistic devices, varied and inventive use of structural features. Writing is compelling, incorporating a range of convincing and complex ideas, and fluently linked paragraphs with seamlessly integrated discourse markers. And that vein is continued for lower level 4. So you're focusing on your communication being convincing with a translatable tone, good vocabulary, structural features, engaging, so that would be the story developing and the surprise at the end, as well as beautiful writing, and coherent paragraphs and discourse markers. If you're just going for a scraped pass, then you need to be clear. Your communication needs to be clear, your tone needs to be clear, you need to use some increasingly sophisticated vocabulary and linguistic devices. You need to use some structural features. Your writing needs to be engaging with connected ideas, paragraphs and discourse markers. And going down to lower level 3, that vein continues. So you're aiming for a pass grade for, well, you're aiming for upper level 3 with the hope that you'll get a lower level 3 and scrape through. How could I improve my content and organisation? Personally, I think I can improve my writing if I use more sophisticated vocabulary, so I would work on my vocabulary. In the class I would use a thesaurus to improve my vocabulary. I also didn't use very many discourse markers, so please make sure that you are using those, and those become particularly important when you move on to paper 2, but they are in the mark scheme for paper 1 as well. So I think I can make those improvements to my writing. This is the mark scheme for technical accuracy. So at level 4, which is a top level, you need consistently secure and accurate sentence demarcation. That's full stops, question marks, exclamation marks, joining words, semicolons and ellipsis. You need a full range of sentence forms, standard English with good grammatical structures and complex grammatical structures at this level. Accuracy in spelling, including ambitious vocabulary. Don't get too hung up on that. It's perfectly possible to pass this if you can't spell. Some people just can't spell. What you need to do is work on your content and organisation to remedy the marks that you're going to lose for spelling. And you need to use the best vocabulary that you can use, so always utilise the thesauruses that are in the room. Okay. How could I improve my technical accuracy? Okay, so these are the things I think I could do better in the things that I've written today. I haven't actually done any dialogue, so I haven't had a chance to show off any quotations and how those are punctuated. So I could work on my punctuation. I also haven't used any semicolons, so that's another thing I could do. Sentence forms. I have used some simple sentences. I haven't used any minor sentences. I have used compound and complex. So just be aware that you need to show examples of all of those in order to have a full range of sentence forms. Don't forget dialogue. And always I can improve my vocabulary.